Hi, I'm Allison Cox. The video you're about to see is commemorating the 40th anniversary of HPBC. The people that will be interviewed will show you the history and the dedication of our organization.
Well, I'm Betty Carter Allman from North Middletown, and along with a good friend of mine, Mary Louise Evans, we joined the Historical Society. Mary Spears Van Meter was the president at that time. Susie Hinkle was secretary, and Donna Ward was our treasurer. And we used to laugh and say we didn't know how much money we had during the winter because Donna would go to Florida with their racehorses and spend the winter. But we met in the library, the upstairs, the big room upstairs. We really had a good time besides trying to save what we felt like were the things in Bourbon County that people should know about in years to come. One big thing I remember was the first Christmas tea we had, and it was at Emily Thompson's on Jackstown Road. And she had this big Christmas tree, and some of us made these cutouts. They're real fancy, and I can't think of the name of them. And we hung those on the tree. We made those one day, and then we went and decorated. And then after that, we had teas at different homes. And that was kind of how we made our money at that time. And I remember when we did the Green Book, and the man who took the pictures didn't always label where they were. It was the Harry B. Clay Farm on the Paris Winchester Road, but the picture had been taken from a different angle than we would see it driving along the road. And we couldn't figure, Mary Louise and I drove by that every time we came to Paris, and we could not figure out where that house was. Finally, after almost all day, it came to us that it was Betty Witt, where Betty Witt was living, Betty Clay Witt. And we have that Green Book there, and people come in and ask about places in Bourbon County, and I pull that Green Book and show them where they are. And then also our graveyard book, as we called it, when we cataloged all the old farm graveyards. I think it's important when people come back looking for their roots to know where some of their family is buried. And I think the push was that we need to do something worthwhile for Bourbon County, some lasting thing. And I feel like we have.
The summer of 1980 and 81, I spent those summers here in Bourbon County doing field work for the Archives of American Art at the Smithsonian, and which enabled me to target some Kentucky history and art history concerns. And I interviewed Edna Talbot Whitley, and I rode around the county with Susan Hinkle in her car looking at houses. And so I was very much aware, and I spent quite a lot of time with Mary Spears Van Meter, sitting on her back porch. And it was at that time that the plans were afoot and research was going on for what we now call the Green Book, the Historic Architecture of Bourbon County. And Susan Hinkle had the proper sheets, and they were being filled out. And we would ride around, and if we saw a house we wanted to see, we'd just drive up the drive, and she would say, "Well, if anybody says anything to us, we'll tell them we're writing a book," which was quite wonderful experience. But the best part about those early years is that Mary Spears Van Meter was a very unselfish, caring, giving, and nurturing person. And she put an awful lot of character. I think one of the most important things about the early days of historic Paris, Bourbon County is from the beginning, it was not a tea party. From the beginning, it was something where there were going to be very solid preservation, historical research, guidelines, and emphasis. And well, I think the best way to put it is that she, like myself, had no desire for us to be quaint. And I think that's a good way to put it. My happiest memory, since I've been deeply involved, was the Christmas tea that we had at the home of Miss English, Airy Castle, out on the LaRue Road, because I just loved that house as a child, and I got it. It was a fantasy house, and I also loved her. She was highly entertaining and a very caring person, and the house was fun, and she'd always let me go up on the roof. And the tea we had there, we had a huge response. We had an enormous number of people. So it was a great success. And I'm almost always happy when large numbers of my fellow Bourbon County citizens are in one place at one time.
The very early days really were a time of getting organized and getting started on what we would be doing. It was also an educational type of time because not everybody that was on in that first group on that board were necessarily people that knew a lot about historic preservation. As we went along, we got to doing some more sophisticated things and had some very good programs. I remember in particular the first house tour we had because somebody thought I could be in charge of that, and that was kind of daunting. But I did do that. We had a walking tour that went down parts of Pleasant Street all the way down Duncan Avenue and on Vine Street. And that was a very pleasant thing to do. And at that time, a lady named Pat Gieselman, I talked to her about we needed some kind of little signs to put around at the houses. And she created our first logo thing, which we still have, our plaques are made of that. And we used that for the tour, and it wasn't too awful long until we voted that that would be our logo. Well, I can remember some really nice home events we've had at Bucknor. We had big spreads in the local newspaper, and also at that time, the Herald was nice about doing things like that for us, and that drew people from out of town to come to our tour. We were able to develop a program where we created about 45,000 acres of rural historic districts in Bourbon County, and I spent most of my time working on that. I would venture to say Bourbon County has more National Register listed properties than anybody, maybe in Kentucky. We have rural ones and we have ones that were done in town, and then individual nominations. I would hope that we're still doing some of the core things that we're doing now that make us successful. I like the exhibits here at the museum, and I like the strictly historic preservation things we do too.
What brought me to Bourbon County was in part the wonderful collection of period buildings, and from the very earliest days of statehood. I moved here because I found a nice stone house I liked, and there are over 40 stone structures in this county, as many as I think any other county in the state has. The organization was founded, of course, by Mary Spears Van Meter, and we have an annual event named for her. Mainly women started this group. There were a couple of male original members, and most of the time they met in someone's living room. Publications were a big part. Besides the Green Book, we've done a book on cemeteries. We've published quite a few pieces, both hardbound and softbound. We did a book on Bybee pottery. I think the cemetery book is next in importance to the Green Book, which was our favorite of all time.
Because we were still doing research and checking on houses that were going to go into the Green Book. So during the summer, when I wasn't teaching, I took Mrs. Whitley, you've heard the name Edna Talbot Whitley. She was a great resource for the Green Book, and she and Mother were great friends. And then my sister, who lived in New York City, often came and spent time with us in the summer. So that was our carload going from old house to old house, just checking up on things, you know. The bylaws said that the president should write a history of the activities that year. So you read the one of 1999, it is very interesting. I wrote down exactly what we had done and who had sponsored it, how much we accomplished. And then, of course, in the middle part was the program for the year. where and when and who, and all that was all organized. Airy Castle. We had 500 people there at that open house. It was shoulder to shoulder, and there were 3 floors, and everybody was up on the 3rd floor and out on the roof and all around the greens. It was just such a treat. Woodford Van Meter, he and his wife Dorothy bought 2 acres down there, the site of the founding of Paris. And they did that in the name of HPBC. And we were proud to own that.
Let me say this, we had a lot of fun as well as doing good. We got together, we liked each other, all of us, and we enjoyed doing what we were doing. And I think that's important anytime you get together if you're trying to do something, if you enjoy it and want to do it.
The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It draws many people together. It provides a focal point for an interest in local history and larger concerns. And as far as we can tell, it is ongoing. And in our current world, very brave, small organizations like ours who do what we can to see it through are to be lauded.
And I would never ventured to guess that we are doing all the things that we are doing today and appealing to different segments of the community, particularly the work with children. I never would have figured that. And after all, when we're gone, it's these children that will need to take up where we've left off.
I think we're a good group and we have a wonderful time doing events for the public. Of course, our goal is always to raise a little money. This place has a budget that needs to be taken care of every year. But all in all, it's the good people and the good events that we have.
And then, of course, I've always had the privilege of living on farmland. And I always rejoice when people buy back the old farmland and return to the roots. I love that. I want everybody to come on home.